Welcome, everybody. I'm so glad that you are with us here tonight. We're going to have yet another great late night conversation. A lot of exciting things are happening, so here we go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. Just one quick second. I'm just getting everything in order for tonight's stream. But yes, we are back, and we are having yet another great late night conversation. Now, the way this works is I give my opening remarks. My opening remarks are followed by a roll call, and then after that, I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. That's the way we do things on this channel. So as far as announcements, we have the big announcement, which is that we've got the conference coming up. We actually have a special guest who's going to come on and talk about that. But if you have a question for the second half of the program, all you need to do is send a super chat via Cash App to me on CalebMoppin22, or you can send a Rumble rant on the Rumble. Those are the two ways to send questions for the second half of the show. But our national convention for the Center for Political Innovation is coming up, and I guess I'm having a little trouble getting the poster on the screen, but here's the poster. It'll be at the Midwest Convention Center in North Lake, Illinois, starting at 9 a.m. on July 12th. And actually, a member of the Center for Political Innovation from Boston named Noah is in Chicago to build for it. So I thought we might just bring Noah on. So welcome, Noah. How you been?
Hey, I'm doing all right. I'm out here in Chicago, staying in an Airbnb. We've been working really hard, trying to promote the convention and whatnot. How are you?
I'm good. It's finally summertime in New York City, and I know it was really hot in Chicago. I was there a few days ago. But I know one thing you've been doing is you've been doing these door hangers, to promote the convention. Maybe I can put an image of what they look like on the screen here. Hold on. Yeah, you've been doing these door hanger things, right? How's that going?
Yeah, it's going pretty good. When you came down, we came down with, it must have been half a box. I don't think it was a full 1,000, but we got them out in the first 3 days that you were here, distributing them mostly in a Muslim neighborhood. And then I finished them off in an area that was around the convention center, right by the O'Hare Airport. And then I was able to we have another box of 1,000. They're actually a little bigger than those ones, probably a little easier to read, but I noticed they bend a little bit on the door, more on the doors when you put them on, so that can be a little annoying. But yesterday I was able to get 250 out. I covered 2 neighborhoods, from Franklin Park all the way up to Schiller Park, which are 2 neighborhoods right by the convention center. And then, my goal is to get all 1,000 out in that area right by that convention center by the end of the week.
Nice. Great. Well, and I know often, with door hangers, you're just putting them on the doors, but you have done some outreach at mosques, et cetera, and you've also been to some of the peace rallies. What kind of reactions are you getting from people?
It's a little mixed. I would say at the peace rallies, at like the No War with Iran rallies, people are generally supportive, or if they're like woke and don't really like us, they tend to, they won't really say it upright. They tend to be polite. People tend to be a lot more polite in person than they are online, right?
Right.
And passersby, they don't have any idea about online drama. They just know that the Palestinian people are oppressed, and so they're willing to take a book.
And that book you got is our Houthi book, right?
Yes, it is.
With a poster for the convention on the back. Yeah.
it's not that one, but yes, we have 400-500 of them. We had 3 boxes in the warehouse. We're down to 1 box, so I'm trying to save them for mosques. I've gone to 2 mosques so far. The first one, it was quite lucky actually. The first mosque we went to, the person that we spoke to was a Zaidi Shia, right? The same kind of Shia that comes from Yemen. He was actually from North Yemen, and he had fled previously to Saudi Arabia. And the other mosque I went to, they were not quite as friendly. Faisal, or maybe I shouldn't say his name, but our contact, directed us to go to one of these and then 2 Shia mosques. And I guess this mosque was opened by Muhammad Ali, a famous boxer in the area who, is a Muslim previously associated with the Nation of Islam. But this mosque, I think, is more like Saudi aligned, and they didn't seem to want me around, and that's okay.
Oh yeah, well no, that's there was an article at the time Muhammad Ali died that was going around when Muhammad Ali endorsed Ronald Reagan in the 1984 presidential election. But that's because he was in the Nation of Islam, and then Elijah Muhammad died. Elijah Muhammad's son, Wallace Muhammad, became the leader, and he converted to Sunniism, and he went to Saudi Arabia, and he became a Wahhabi, and so they became like, I think they were called the Islamic Organization of America or something. Right. And the Saudis are pro-Republican. So in 1984, Muhammad Ali was a part of that group. He endorsed Reagan in the 1984 presidential election. And they asked him why. And he said, well, Reagan wants to keep prayer in the school, and that's enough. That's enough. That was the reason he gave. But and then it was Minister Farrakhan restarted the Nation of Islam in 1978 with funding from Gaddafi. So like the Nation of Islam that currently exists, the Final Call newspaper and stuff, that's not who Muhammad Ali was affiliated with. It's kind of interesting. So.
Yeah, it is quite interesting. I noticed that the neighborhood that the mosque is around, I went and put some door knockers out, and I noticed that it was a wealthier neighborhood. All the houses were quite big and had gates around them, but you would see a lot of like black nationalist flags, with the red, black, and green flag on people's houses. So, hey, I think maybe people who go to the mosque, maybe not people who are worried about their jobs, might be interested in the kind of stuff that we do. So I put some out.
Well, it's interesting because I guess the majority of Muslims in America are African Americans. They are not Arabs. You think of Islam as being an Arab thing, but because of Malcolm X and because of the Nation of Islam and all of that, African Americans tend to be the majority of American Muslims. And so it's all very interesting. And the Nation of Islam, they weren't the first. There were a number of like religious groups in American prisons and such that had Islamic roots, like the Temple of Moorish Science. I guess they are. I don't know if they're technically Muslims, but they draw heavily from the Quran and such. And I think they were around before the Nation of Islam, and they were, kind of a black nationalist sect, religious sect. And so it's very interesting. Chicago, there's a lot of history. At one point in Chicago, there was it started out as a gang called Blackstone Rangers. Have you ever heard of the Blackstone Rangers?
I have not. Tell me more.
Yeah, so they were like a street gang in Chicago, the Blackstone Rangers, and the U.S. government started giving them funding to run community centers as an alternative to the Black Panthers, right, during the 1960s. And so they got government funding to run these like community centers, and they all converted to Islam, right, the Blackstone Nation, and they were just a big organization in Chicago that I guess had criminal ties, but they were anti-communist, so they got some government funding, and they converted to Islam. And then the U.S. government alleged that they'd been given funding from Gaddafi and that they were, planning acts of terrorism. So they were all thrown in prison in the 80s. It's kind of a weird story. And that's not the first time stuff like that has happened, where the U.S. government backs some group against communists and then decides to throw them all in jail, for
a tale as old as time, as they say.
Right, exactly. But the Blackstone Rangers and the Blackstone Nation, that's kind of a weird story. And I also know that the Black Hebrew Israelites, which are not Muslims, they're the Black Jews, they're really big in Chicago as well. I think we saw them. Didn't we run into them at one of the rallies or something?
Yeah, it was the No War with Iran rally. I've been to 2 of them so far since I've been to Chicago. There was the one I went to you with, and I handed out books at another one that was a little bigger and seemed to be getting some mainstream attention. And the one that, when we ran into them, they were caged off in a little section, and they were kind of like heckling the Palestine protesters, which I thought was really, really interesting, because I think, the Black Israelites, they're like kind of anti-Israel, but not really. It's like, it's fascinating. But yeah, they were like yelling about how people who support the Palestinians are a bunch of white people, and it was interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, my understanding is the Black Hebrew Israelites support Israel, but they don't like the Jews. They think white Jews are imposters, but they also think the formation of Israel is good, I believe, which is
Oh,
interesting.
okay, that is really
Right?
interesting.
And that there are a couple settlements that are Black Hebrew Israelite, but there's so many different Black Hebrew Israelite groups that's not like universal, right? There are some sects that are anti-Israel or whatever. It's kind of interesting. It's like you have British Israelism, which is like a white nationalist thing where they claim the white people are actually the Jews, right? And then you have the Black Hebrew Israelites that think the Black people are actually the Jews, right? And I believe the Nation of Islam, they don't think that the Black people are actually the Jews. They think the Jews in the Bible are the white people, right? And that the story of the Israelites in the Old Testament is actually like an analogy for white people or something. And like they were slaves in Egypt because the Black people were the original people, and Yaqub made the white people, right, or something, and then they were kicked out of Egypt or something. I don't know. It's a long thing, but I'm not in the Nation of Islam, so not my thing, but it's very interesting to me. All of this is really fascinating, and so much history in Chicago. So yeah, so you're doing mosque visits tomorrow, you said, right?
Yeah, well, Shia mosques tend to be a lot smaller than Sunni mosques, and so they tend to only be open on Friday, which is their day of prayer, right? Friday is it Friday or no? It's Friday, right?
Yeah,
Friday is for Muslims, Saturday is for Jewish people, Sunday is for Christians, right? And so they tend to only really be open on Friday. So tomorrow I'm going to go and visit as many mosques as I can. I have 2 or 3 on my list that are Shia community centers. The goal is to talk to leadership, see if they can give out some books and promote our convention. Hopefully, I mean, it is kind of like a Muslim holiday, the day of our convention, but hopefully, a few people will show up. And yeah, at the very least, it'll be good to foster a relationship once we have a presence in Chicago. And then, maybe they can help us organize, anti-war demonstrations that aren't woke.
Yeah. Well, hey, get some business cards, get some business cards. That would be the main thing that I think would be a good thing to do. Get some business cards of people we can be in touch with, get those books to people. Also, our demonstration that we did, you're featured very prominently in it, for Ibrahim Traore from Sunday, has created a wave. Have you seen like all these? I mean, our YouTube channel, it got quite a bit of exposure, but also a few African streamers have picked it up and are commenting on it. Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw when semi-viral. I was wondering why it jumped from like 900 views to like it's almost at 100,000, right?
Is it?
In the past few days.
Wow, I haven't checked. It was pretty high last time I checked. I haven't even looked. Where are we at?
It was at 30,000 yesterday. I checked today. It was like 50 or 60 at least.
Wow. Yeah, I think I'm looking now. It's at 53,000. So yeah, that's something. I mean, those numbers don't mean anything. You never really know. I am really suspicious of any internet numbers at this point. I've seen so many weird things, but I have seen that a number of other YouTube channels have picked it up. So that means other people are watching it. You know what I'm saying? That wouldn't be happening if those were all bots. You know what I'm saying? And I noticed there are YouTube channels from Africa. Like there's an African streamer who showed the video. There's another African YouTube channel that does like AI videos about Ibrahim Traore and about Black self-determination. So it seems to have picked up some momentum, so that's pretty great. I'm feeling good about that. And that means people on the African continent are seeing that there's Americans who love Ibrahim Traore, that was great. And there were people who had never met CPI before who came to that rally and participated, right? That was pretty exciting, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was pretty great. There was that lady she actually kind of helped to set up the banner, right? And she was just walking down the street, she said, and somebody said, "Are you going to the protest?" Because I guess somebody had read our banner as we were trying to unfurl it. And she was like, "What banner?" And yeah, she was wearing an Ibrahim Traore shirt. It said Traore and had Africa on it. She was a very nice person. There were 2 young ladies who were just looking for something to do, really. They had told us that they were interested in going to like other demonstrations. They were with another group before, and then they wanted to go to there was a PSL demonstration or something that afternoon, and they really seemed to like us. I'm really hopeful that they'll end up at our convention because we have such great energy. And there was another gentleman who, again, was just walking by and saw what we were doing and supported us. And that was really Ibrahim Traore is actually surprisingly popular, especially among Black people in the United States. I mean, I guess it's not surprising because he is a great leader who is helping Africa to stand up for itself, right?
Yeah. Speaking of which, the CPI our latest book, we published a book on Ibrahim Traore today. I'll put that on the screen as well. Penny, our own Penny Arcos of Minnesota CPI, famous for confronting Ilhan Omar. She wrote this book, Africa's Flame, The Rise of Ibrahim Traore. It's 2 really good articles she wrote. One is called Fighting Imperialism with Pineapples. The other is called Burkina Faso, A Progressive Populist Revolution. And then we have an actual speech by Ibrahim Traore as well. And it's published in this short pamphlet, that we published. And it's actually available on Amazon. You can buy a copy for only $8.70. And we're printing them in bulk. I put in the order with the printer today to have them for the conference. This is Ibrahim Traore is good because it's like, not only is he like a really, really important African leader, but also Ibrahim Traore, it's like by explaining why he's so loved, you can explain anti-imperialism. You can explain what we're all about, what innovationism and what anti-globalism, anti-imperialism is all about. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Noah?
Well, yeah, I mean, Ibrahim Traore, yes, he comes out of an anti-colonial movement in Burkina Faso, but it's very eclectic, right? He believes in God. He's a Muslim, and for him, it's really just about developing the African continent and making sure that Africa is strong. And it's pretty similar to kind of what CPI does in the United States. I remember you can even talk about, your latest book on Khrushchevism and cult of personality. I saw an interview recently that one of his bodyguards did, because, they've made so many attempts on his life, but he's such a beloved leader that one of his bodyguards was saying that they tried to pay him $3 million to take Traore's life, and he refused because he said he wouldn't be able to live with himself if he knew that he had destroyed Africa's chance for development. I mean, that's really powerful. And if you look at American media, they would look to that and say, oh, that's proof that, Burkina Faso is a cult or something, and that they look up to this leader. But really what it shows is that he's somebody who actually cares about his people, and then he's respected and he's loved because he's bringing development, not because he's trying to degrow Africa, along with Bill Gates and other people who are trying to buy land there.
Yeah, no, it's very, very exciting. Well, hey, do you have any other reports, any updates you want to share from the field out there in Chicago? I would say keep doing what you're doing. You're doing a great job. People in the chat, Megan gives you a shout out. Megan, another CPI member, says you are doing you are doing good work, Noah. Keep it up. And, everyone's supporting you and really appreciative. And we also really want to thank the people who donated the money to help, pay for Noah's Airbnb and help Noah be out there for a month to just build along with our Chicago comrades. Thank you to everyone who did that. But any other thoughts,
Last thought, I guess, would be if you can make it out to our convention, we really appreciate anybody who can. I know flights are really expensive right now, but if you can't make it, a donation would be much appreciated too. We're really hoping that we can really make this event really something special, something people will remember, because this country desperately needs a movement like CPI right now.
Absolutely. Well, keep up the great work, Noah. And good luck at the mosque visits tomorrow. Good luck over the weekend with the Chicago comrades. You're doing great, and dare to struggle, dare to win.
Thank you, Caleb.
Thank you. Later. Yep. Well, that was great to have a field report from Noah. And just a reminder, the CPI National Convention is on July 12th. Here, we'll put the image on the screen one more time. It is on July 12th. It is at the Midwest Convention Center in Northlake, Illinois, very close to the Chicago O'Hare Airport. Please register for the convention. Link is down below to register to let us know you're coming. If you're in the Chicago area and you need transportation, we are looking to arrange, people to pick you up. So just, register and say you need transportation, and we'll follow up with you. We need you there. The best thing you can do for us with regards to the convention is to attend. That's what we really, really want from you, is we want you to be there. We want you at the convention. But if you can't make it, send us a donation. We have a GoFundMe, and we've received a lot of very generous gifts. That's why we can afford to send Noah there for a month and all of that. So, keep it coming, though, because we just keep hitting. You have no idea how expensive it is to do events like this, right? Turns out we're going to have a sound technician on site to run the very complex sound system that the event has. And we have a video production team to film everything. And we got to have hotel rooms and for the speakers coming from out of town. And we got to rent vehicles to transport the equipment. And whoo, it's adding up. So if you can give us a donation to help fund the event, if you can't be there, that would be very, very much appreciated. And yeah, I guess we'll just jump into our live stream for tonight. It was really great. Noah could come on and give us that update. If you're in Chicago and you run into that guy, why, you'll know that's Noah, CPI volunteer and activist who's doing great work. So yeah, the way this works, opening remarks, which I'm about to jump into, followed by the roll call. And then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. Questions can be sent via Rumble Rants, or you can cash at me at CalebMoppin22. So there's something I've been wanting to talk about for quite a long time on these streams. It's related to the book I put out about Khrushchevism. It's related to the Stalin-Trotsky debate. It's related to communist history. It's related to anti-imperialism. It's related to spirituality. It's related to everything. It's actually related to everything we talk about. And I've wanted to talk about it for a long time. Sometimes the best way to help people understand things is by referring to art or literature or movies. You know, often, you know, if you use a movie to explain a political concept, people really, really get it. You know, and the same can be said for books. The same can be said for television programs. You know, art is something that makes people think, at least good art. And so I wanted to talk about a movie that came out a few years ago that's based on a novel that's part of a very important literary trend. A couple of years ago, about a decade ago, Leonardo DiCaprio starred in a movie directed by Baz Luhrmann called The Great Gatsby. And The Great Gatsby, I saw the movie, and in high school I read the book. It was one of the books we read in high school English class, and it's commonly taught in English classes in America. It's considered one of the most famous American novels, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. And if you watch the movie, The Great Gatsby, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, and if it's very true to the book, there are a couple differences, but it's actually pretty close to the book. What the story, it basically tells the story of, you know, there's a very, very wealthy neighborhood in Long Island, New York. And in this wealthy neighborhood, there's a really rich man who throws really wild parties with lots of alcohol in the 1920s, in the age of Prohibition, when alcohol was illegal. There's this wealthy man that everyone knows as Jay Gatsby, and nobody knows where he came from. Nobody quite knows who he is, but he throws these wild parties full of dance and alcohol, and he's just a really well-known guy in Long Island, New York. And one of his neighbors, a guy who lives in the neighborhood in West Egg in Long Island, he decides to find out who Jay Gatsby really is. And it turns out that Jay Gatsby grew up in poverty, and he fought in World War I. And that Jay Gatsby, he fell in love with a very rich girl, but she wouldn't marry him because he was poor. All right. She said, rich girls don't marry poor boys. So he came back from the war, from World War I, determined to make a lot of money. And so he became a bootlegger, and he got involved with organized crime, and he sold alcohol illegally, and he made lots and lots of money, you know, selling alcohol through pharmacies. People would buy the alcohol pretending it was actually medicine, but it was alcohol. And he made millions of dollars. He became very, very wealthy. And so he tracked down his old girlfriend who wouldn't marry him now that he was a millionaire, and decided he wanted her to marry him. But she was already married to a Wall Street banker. And this Wall Street banker, Tom Buchanan, who's a white supremacist, you know, a guy who believes in racial pseudoscience, a very wealthy man who's like a co-owner of Chase Bank. She's married to him. And Jay Gatsby tracks her down, and he is convinced that Daisy, this girl he's been in love with, will leave her asshole, racist, rich husband for him. But she won't. And so he's very, very disappointed. He's very heartbroken by the whole thing. And he's quite disappointed. And one thing leads to another, and there's a shootout, and everybody dies. It's a rather tragic, almost Hamlet-like story. But one of the points of the book is that Gatsby, this poor boy, got involved in organized crime and became very, very wealthy because he was chasing a dream. That dream was the girl, Daisy. But yet, when he finally tracks her down after he's made his millions of dollars, what comes across to the reader is that Daisy, the girl that he's blown up in his mind to be this amazing girl, she's kind of a piece of shit. She's stupid, she's ditzy, and even though her husband, Tom Buchanan, is an asshole, a bully, a racist, doesn't treat her right, is cheating on her, she still stays with him, and, she's really not worthy of the love that Gatsby has built her up. Gatsby built her up in his mind to be this shining prize, to be this pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But she's really not worth it. And he's been chasing a lie his whole life. And it's a really depressing, pessimistic novel. And it was written by F. Scott Fitzgerald, because F. Scott Fitzgerald was part of what they called the lost generation of post-World War I writers. And Gatsby and his love for Daisy is supposed to be an analogy for the American dream. And the American dream is supposed to be a lie. The idea is that a generation of people, they saw World War I and how awful it was, the poison gas and all of that, and that the American dream was just a big lie. And they felt hopeless and pessimistic. And that's what The Great Gatsby is about. It's about disappointment in the American dream. The American dream turned out to be fake, right? And that we've been working so hard and we're obsessed with money and working hard in America, but at the end of the day, we don't get anything for it. It's very pessimistic and dark. But it's not the only piece of writing from the 1920s that fits that pattern. There's a very famous playwright from the same era called Eugene O'Neill. You've ever heard of Eugene O'Neill? And Eugene O'Neill, he wrote a play called The Iceman Cometh. And it's about a group of people in a bar, all of whom are hardworking Americans that have a big dream of how they're going to start a business and become wealthy and all of this. And there's a cynical, drunk, traveling salesman who's in the bar with them. And person by person, he picks apart their dreams and shows that their dreams are never going to happen. And he's the Iceman. He cools off their enthusiasm and leaves them in a pessimistic, dark place. It's a particularly dark play. But what's interesting, and this is why it's related to everything I'm talking about, is that Eugene O'Neill, the playwright, who also wrote a play called Long Day's Journey into Night, which is about opioid addiction, right? It's about how his own mother was a morphine addict. He also wrote a play called The Emperor Jones. Eugene O'Neill is from this same group, The Lost Generation. Eugene O'Neill was a communist, and he was a member of the Industrial Workers of the World. And he was associated with the Communist Party in its early years. So much so that he's actually portrayed in the movie Reds. And I actually want to show you this clip. I think I can get away with it. But there's a 1980 movie directed and starring Warren Beatty. It's about the life of John Reed, the communist journalist. And in that movie, Jack Nicholson plays Eugene O'Neill. And I actually want to show you the clip of Jack Nicholson as Eugene O'Neill in Reds. I want to show you a clip from it, because it's quite powerful. This is towards the end of the movie. And Diane Keaton, she plays Louise Bryant, who's married to John Reed and is very excited about communism and the Soviet Union and Bolshevism. And Eugene O'Neill is this alcoholic playwright who's very pessimistic and dark, and and is cynical about the whole thing. This is the Hollywood movie Reds. It actually won Best Director at the Oscars and it was a film that's somewhat sympathetic about the founders of American communism, but very subtly anti-communism. But this is the scene where Eugene O'Neill, the playwright, played by Jack Nicholson, confronts Louise Bryant, played by Diane Keaton, and they argue about the Soviet Union. And I just want to show this scene because it really represents where the two of them were at. You know, it's fictional. It's from the 1980 movie, but it shows Jack Nicholson playing Eugene O'Neill, presenting the cynical perspective of the lost generation, and Louise Bryant, who's an excited, you know, communist journalist married to John Reed. So here we go.
Mrs. Reed, sit down. What can I do for you?
Hello, Jean. How are you?
Fine. And you?
I'm fine.
Sit down. How's Jack?
Oh, he's fine. He's in Russia.
Is he?
Yes, he's trying to get recognition from the Comintern for the Communist Labor Party. You see, they've split into two different factions.
And you? Left alone with your work again?
No. Well, actually, yes, but my work is different now. I do a lot of lecturing about what I saw in Russia.
Ah, yes, Russia. Russia's been good for you and Jack. Giving you a way to meet people, giving him a reason to leave home. Russia. Russia.
Are you really that cynical, or are you angry with me?
I'm really that cynical. Why would I be angry with you?
Jean, if you'd been to Russia, you'd never be cynical about anything again. You would have seen people transformed, ordinary
Louise,
people.
Something in me tightens when an American intellectual's eyes shine and they start to talk to me about the Russian people.
Wait.
Something in me says, watch it. A new version of Irish Catholicism is being offered for your faith. And I wonder why a lovely wife like Louise Reed, who's just seen the brave new world, is sitting around with a cynical bastard like me, instead of trotting all over Russia with her idealistic husband. It's almost worth being converted.
Well, I was wrong to come.
You and Jack have a lot of middle-class dreams for two radicals. Jack dreams that he can hustle the American working man, whose one dream is to be rich enough not to have to work, into a revolution led by his party. And you dream that if you discuss the revolution with a man before you go to bed with him, that it'll be missionary work rather than sex. I'm sorry to see you and Jack so serious about your sports. It's particularly disappointing in you, Louise. You had a lighter touch when you were touting free love.
Well, you've become quite the critic, haven't you, Jean? Just leaned back and analyzed us all. Duplicitous women who tout free love and then get married. Power-mad journalists who join the revolution instead of observing it. Middle-class radicals who come looking for sex and then talk about Russia. It must seem so contemptible to a man like you who has the courage to sit on his ass and observe human inadequacy from the inside of a bottle. Well, I've never seen you do anything for anyone. I've never seen you give anything to anyone, so I can understand why you might suspect the motives of those who have. But whatever Jack's motives are, how...
I seem to have touched a wound.
You're a wounding son of a bitch, and whatever I've done to you, you've made me pay for it.
Louise?
Yeah, so I apologize for the low volume. You might want to try watching it on the original link. It's a little bit louder. Sometimes when I put clips on StreamYard, it turns down the volume. But if you had trouble hearing it, so basically, you know, Louise Bryant is, you know, talking to Eugene O'Neill, and she's telling him about how excited she is about Russia and the Soviet Union. And he gets all cynical. And he says, oh, it looks like there's a new religion, right? A new pope in Moscow. And, you know, and it's a new version of Irish Christianity. And he says, you know, your dream is to hustle hustle the American working man into whose only dream is to be rich enough not to have to work, into a revolution led by his party. And he's completely cynical. And then Louise Brandt goes off on him and says, I've never seen you do anything good for anybody. You just critique humanity and its inadequacies from the inside of a bottle. I've never seen you accomplish anything. You're a, she calls him like a son of a bitch or something like that. But that's a particularly important scene. It's a particularly important scene. Hold on. Got to send something to somebody. Whee, right? It's a particularly important scene because Eugene O'Neill was a communist, but he stopped being a communist pretty quick after the Russian Revolution. And there was another writer from this milieu who was very similar. His name was John Dos Passos. And he also was a communist who stopped being a communist pretty quick. And it was quite trendy in the 1920s. You remember the Roaring 20s. After World War I, the U.S. stock market started rising. They were rebuilding Europe that had been destroyed by the war. The USA industrial base was growing. They called it the Roaring 20s because there was kind of an economic boom. And there were these middle-class writers who were really kind of damaged by the trauma of World War I. And they wrote these very pessimistic, dark novels about how there's no hope, novels, plays, about how there's no hope, about how the American dream is a lie. But they all were excited about communism because it was against America, because it was radical, because it was edgy, because it was part of being alienated. They were attracted to communism. And they joined the Communist Party, and they were around the Communist Party in the 1920s. But then later, when the Great Depression hit and when the communist movement started really expanding, and when the communists started building mass demonstrations of the unemployed, they hated it and they quit. And some of them became Trotskyites and some of them just became straight up anti-communists immediately. One of them was a guy named Whittaker Chambers. And Whittaker Chambers ended up becoming the main, stool pigeon or informant to the House Un-American Activities Committee. He's the guy who framed up Alger Hiss and sent Alger Hiss to federal prison. And accused Alger Hiss of secretly being a communist. And, all these guys, they were, had gone to Ivy League schools, Harvard and Yale and Columbia University, and they were from quite wealthy backgrounds, and they were all very, very pessimistic. And they liked communism when it wasn't popular, when it was an edgy thing, when the Soviet Union was barricaded and isolated. They liked the theory of permanent revolution. They liked Trotsky. But then as the global economy crashed and as the world conditions started changing and as fascism started rising and communism started to become the main ideology of anti-fascists, they hated it and they became anti-communist. There was a guy named Max Eastman. He was one of these people. There's a whole layer of these guys who were really into communism when nobody else was. But then when communism kind of became a major factor in the early 30s, and especially in the late 1930s during the Popular Front years, they wanted nothing to do with communism. And it's very, very interesting because these guys were all pessimists. They had contempt for humanity. They thought humanity was bad. They thought the American dream was hopeless. They thought human beings deep down were just nasty people. And they really, really were attracted to communism when it was just seen as this dangerous subversive movement. But then as the communist movement gained ground, they turned against it. It's very, very interesting to me. Very, very interesting to me. And a lot of them became Trotskyites and eventually neocons. A lot of them just became conservative, anti-communists immediately. But as communism came into its own, they opposed it. And I want to show you, and I've shown this picture on these streams many, many times. I've shown this picture, but I just can't show it enough times. This image this image was the Communist Party's national convention. I believe it was in Madison Square Garden in 1939. This was the height of the Popular Front. You know, when the Communist Party was a group that had hundreds of thousands of members and was, you know, part of the Roosevelt coalition, had influence over millions of people, was like a major political party in the United States. The height of the Popular Front years, where the communists were the main anti-fascist organization in the United States. This was the National Convention of the Communist Party USA. Now, if you look at the convention here, you look at this, what is that? They got an image of Abraham Lincoln, the guy who's on the $5 bill and who's on the penny, the leader of the struggle against slavery in the United States. They have a huge image of Abraham Lincoln. And above Abraham Lincoln, it says security and democracy. And then below Lincoln, they have images of Lenin and Stalin. And then they have a big banner behind the crowd there. And it says, the friendship of the people of the USA and the USSR. Friendship of the peoples of the USA and the USSR. And this was the Communist Party that these guys didn't like. They hated this Communist Party. They hated this Communist Party. This Communist Party that had millions of members. This Communist Party whose members were invited to the White House to meet with President Roosevelt. This Communist Party that led labor unions that had millions of members, the Auto Workers Union, the Steel Workers Union, unionized the steel industry, unionized the meat packers and the automobiles. This very powerful Communist Party of the 1930s that was part of the global anti-fascist struggle. This was the Communist Party that these guys hated. They loved the Communist Party when it was small and isolated and when it kind of was a way to express their disgust with the world around them. But when the Communist Party got to be popular, they changed their views. Now, there's one exception. There's one exception, which is John Steinbeck. John Steinbeck, who wrote The Grapes of Wrath, but he also wrote Of Mice and Men. He was one of these guys. He was a Lost Generation writer, but he liked the Communist Party. And if you read the novel The Grapes of Wrath, The Grapes of Wrath is very much a communist novel, right? It has a reference where it compares Lenin and Stalin to Washington and Jefferson. There's, a section about what it means to be a Red. A Red is anybody who fights, who demands more than 2 cents an hour, what we need are Reds and agitators and organizers. And, John Steinbeck, he ended up, following the Communist Party until McCarthyism, until the 1950s. He liked the Communist Party of the Popular Front years. But these guys, Eugene O'Neill and John Dos Passos and F. Scott Fitzgerald and Max Eastman, they did not like the Communist Party. And there's something there. There is something there. Now, I have many times, this is so interesting to me. I have many times thought about this, but I want to put an image on the screen that I think gets to what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out what we're doing here. That's the main thing, is that from the moment we formed CPI, the people who control communism in America, the people who run the Communist Party USA, the people who run the Workers' World Party and the PSL and all the different parties, they've immediately seen us and shouted enemy, enemy. They've seen us and they've said enemy. And we haven't been able to understand why. But I think we can start to understand why. Now, this image, this is also from the same year. This is from the same year, 1939, that image of the Communist Party convention with Lincoln on the stage. This is the same year. This is 1939. This is a comic book from 1939. Superman. The comic book Superman was published in the year of 1939. And Superman, it was written by two Jewish guys who lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And Superman, his first mission was to rescue a group of striking miners and he protects them from their crooked boss. And Superman, what's his nickname? His nickname is The man of steel. And what is man of steel in Russian? Stalin. Stalin. Right? So there's a guy named Stalin who goes around rescuing striking miners. But on top of that, this might not seem like a big deal nowadays, but this was a really big deal, back in 1939, is that Superman was anti-racist, right? And nowadays, we just kind of roll our eyes. It's like, yeah, okay, everyone's against racism. But back then, that was a big deal because black people couldn't drink out of the same drinking fountains as white people. And for a lot of America, racism was considered to be unquestionable. It was just the way of life. But this is an actual Superman comic book, right? This is a Superman image from these years. This is an image from a Superman comic. Look at this, right? And remember, boys and girls, your school, like our country, is made up of Americans of many different races, religions, and national origins. So if you hear anybody talk against a schoolmate or anyone because of his religion, his race, or his national origin, don't wait. Tell him that kind of talk is un-American. Keep your school all American. Look at that. At a time when black people couldn't vote, when black people were second-class citizens, the Superman comic books were telling kids they should never talk against anyone's race or religion or national origin, and keep your school all American. Racism is un-American. That was the message of the Superman comics. That's a really big deal. Nowadays, yeah, that kind of stuff grows on trees. But back in 1939, that was a really, really, really big deal that the comics talked that way. On top of that, who is Superman's greatest rival? Who is his enemy, right? Who is Superman's enemy? It's Lex Luthor, right? Lex Luthor. Here, I'll pull up Lex Luthor. And Lex Luthor is an evil capitalist. He's a high-tech capitalist, all right? Lex Luthor, the villain of the Superman comics, is a high-tech capitalist. And thanks to Noah, who was just on here, he knows his comic book history way better than I do. Apparently, in the 1970s, they made Lex Luthor the president of the United States to demonize Richard Nixon. They compared him to Richard Nixon, and he was a right-wing president of the United States. Superman goes around fighting a ruthless capitalist named Lex Luthor. He preaches against racism. He protects labor unions. And he says racism is un-American. He's the man of steel. He's Stalin, fighting for the working man, fighting against racism, fighting against fascism. Here's a wild story. This is a wild story. But during World War II, the Ku Klux Klan, the KKK, they were supporting Hitler. And so the Superman comics, they actually started having Superman fight the KKK, in the comic books. Here, I'll show you an image. The KKK were the villains, and Superman went around fighting the Ku Klux Klan. Here, I'll show you. This is Superman fighting the KKK and in the comic books during World War II, right? Knights, if we all work together, we can handle them. And Superman says, doubt it, right? And he's fighting the Klan. Superman's fighting the KKK, right? Superman, I'll just put it this way, right? In 1939, this is what the Communist Party of the United States looked like. This was what the Communist Party stood for, right? This was the Communist Party of the United States in 1939. Stalin was running the Soviet Union, and Roosevelt was running the United States, and Hitler was the enemy, and fascism was the enemy, and communists were leading the fight against fascism. And this is how the Communist Party looked. And in 1939, this guy would have very happily fit in with the Communist Party. Maybe he wouldn't have been a member, but he would have been good friends with the Communist Party. because the Communist Party was fighting the KKK and opposing racism, and so was he. The Communist Party was supporting labor unions, and so was he. The Communist Party was opposing fascism and ruthless capitalists that try to support fascism, and so was he. In 1939, Superman would have been very good friends with the Communist Party. And the Communist Party was very patriotic during those years, right? They said communism is nothing but 20th century Americanism. And the Communist Party of the United States looked like this. They looked like this. And Superman, the Man of Steel, would have fit in very, very well with them, right? And if you read literature from the Communist Party in these years, you get this understanding. You get this understanding very, very well. So then what happened? Well, after World War II, the Communist Party was outlawed. McCarthyism came in. Communists were thrown in prison. And, the Communist Party was broken up. But then after McCarthyism, you got the Civil Rights Movement, you got the Cold War liberalism, and you started to have something called the New Left. The New Left, right? Which were people that were opposed to racism, were opposed to the Vietnam War, but they didn't look like Superman. They didn't look like this. They did not look like this. The New Left had a very, very different aesthetic. The New Left didn't look like this. And in fact, there was one group of people among the New Left. They were called the Weathermen. They were called the Weather Underground, or the Weathermen. And the Weathermen, they were called. And they didn't look like Superman. They didn't look like that 1939 Communist Convention. This was the Weathermen. Right? This is from the days of rage that the Weathermen organized in Chicago. With their football helmets, they assembled in downtown Chicago, engaged in mass vandalism, fought with police officers. That was the Weathermen. And there was one guy who was a leader of the Weathermen. It was a guy named Jeff Jones. Jeff Jones was a leader of the Weather Underground terrorists. Here, I'll put a picture of him on the screen. A guy named Jeff Jones. All right, I guess I can't find a picture of him as a Weatherman, but years later, I guess he wrote an autobiography. This is a picture of Jeff Jones, the Weather Underground terrorist, right? And Jeff Jones of the Weather Underground, I guess he is famous for giving a speech. So in 1969, after Richard Nixon was president, after Fred Hampton, the leader of the Black Panthers, was killed, the Weathermen, they called what they called their National War Congress in Flint, Michigan. And it was a gathering. It was like a little convention they had. It was called the Flint War Council, right? The Flint War Council that the Weather Underground had. And at the Flint War Council, they honored Charles Manson. Bernadine Dorn, one of their leaders, a woman named Bernadine Dorn, she honored Charles Manson. She thought Charles Manson was really great because he killed people, right? And she said they killed a woman with the very fork she was eating, with right on. And they thought it was great that Charles Manson had killed people, right? This is Bernadine Dorn, who was a leader of the Weather Underground, and she was quoted at their famous war council saying that that Charles Manson was awesome because he killed pigs, he killed white people, he killed pigs with the forks they were eating on. And the Weathermen actually started saluting each other with four fingers, fork for the four fingers, the fork that Charles Manson allegedly killed Sharon Tate with. I mean, unbelievable. And then Jeff Jones, this guy, Jeff Jones, he gave a speech at the Flint War Council. And he said that the goal of the Weather Underground was that the Weathermen, they wanted to appeal to the part of every kid who loves Lex Luthor and hates Superman. Now let that sink in for a moment. the part of every kid that loves Lex Luthor and hates Superman. Now, Superman was a communist. Superman was anti-racist. Superman supported striking workers. Superman, Superman literally, his name, Man of Steel, means Stalin. And the Weather Underground, they said that their goal, that they wanted to appeal to the part of every kid that loved Lex Luthor and hated Superman. Now, what does that mean? What does that mean? Right? This is kind of what we're getting at. And I've been developing this thesis for many years. And I discovered the writings of a very brilliant writer from the British Communist Party who was a psychologist, a psychoanalyst named Reuben Osborne. Reuben Osborne, he wrote a book called The Psychology of Reaction, and he wrote another book called Freud and Marx, A Dialectical Study, both of which are free online. You can find them on the internet. There's PDF files of both books. They're both very, very good. They're an introduction to Freudian psychoanalytic thought. But in both of the books, first in the Freud and Marx book, but especially in the follow-up book, The Psychology of Reaction, he makes a very, very interesting point, which is, he says that communists, they do good. They fight racism. They build labor unions. They oppose fascism. However, communism as an ideology appeals to people's deviant and unhealthy emotions. And fascism does bad, encourages racism, encourages war and killing and political repression and crimes against humanity. However, fascism appeals to people's healthy emotions. And the point that Reuben Osborne makes in The Psychology of Reaction is that has to be flipped. Communists have to learn to appeal to people's healthy emotions rather than to appeal to people's negative emotions. And he talks about, for example, patriotism. There is nothing wrong with loving your country. Let me repeat that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with loving your country. It is completely normal and healthy to love your country, no matter what country you're in. If you're in Burkina Faso, it is normal and healthy to love Burkina Faso. If you're in Zimbabwe, it is perfectly normal and healthy to love Zimbabwe. If you're in Brazil, it is perfectly normal and healthy to love Brazil. The only exception would be a national and oppressed minority. You can understand why Black people would not love America. Why? Because they're an oppressed nationality. They're not treated as Americans. And many Black people say, I don't love America. I love Blackness. I'm a Black nationalist. So they're just identifying with a different nationality. They still love their people. They still love their community. They don't identify with the government or the country. That's different. But unless you are with an oppressed nationality, it's perfectly normal and healthy to love your country. And in fact, loving one's country is actually very similar to loving one's parents. Why do you think that Germans called it the fatherland? Why do you think they call it Mother Russia? Why do they call your homeland your motherland? It's perfectly normal and healthy to love your country. And fascists picked up on the fact that people love their country, and they took this normal, healthy, natural emotion, and they turned it into hate, and they turned it into bigotry, and they turned it into a desire to hurt other people. Very evil what they did. It's totally normal and healthy to love your country. However, fascists took that and they turned it into into hate. And in Reuben Osborne's book, he talks about, Hitler did a psychological manipulation where he basically got Germans to believe that Jews were like sexually molesting their mothers or raping their mothers, right? It was like the way he talked about Germany, the fatherland, the way he talked about the Jews. He was subtly telling people, your mother's being raped, your mother is being sexually molested by the Jews. And that's how Hitler was able to foment the mass hatred for Jews that he was able to foment. Was he was able to do this kind of weird psychology where people identify their country with their parent, and people want to protect their parent from somebody who's harming them. It's kind of very fascinating. However, the point that Reuben Osborne makes is that communists, on the other hand, they don't appeal to people's desire to love their country. They appeal to people's Oedipal desires, the desire to kill their parent. Communists are people that say, I have no homeland, I have no country, and I hate this country. I am and it's to most people, if you go around saying, I hate my mom and dad, I hate my family, you don't come across as a healthy person. You come across as a person who's got issues. And that communism as an ideology, it appeals to people's rage, people's jealousy, people's desire for vengeance, people's feelings of being victimized, of being traumatized, people's paranoia, their fear that they're being persecuted. Communism appeals to a lot of very unhealthy feelings. And it takes those unhealthy feelings, which can be very, very strong, and channels them in a way that gets people to do great good. Right? And it's kind of amazing that communists have been able to do that. People that are very paranoid, people that have been abused and been, been molested, people who have a lot of anger, people who are really hurt, people who feel the world's been really unfair to them. Communism as an ideology took that damage that people had and turned that into energy to do good. Right? It inspired people, who felt victimized, who felt that they were hurt. It inspired them to stand with black people when they were being lynched, and to, white guys from New York City would go down to the South and get arrested supporting black people because in their minds, they identified with a group of people that were victimized. That's good. Right? And communists, they felt the world had been unfair to them, and that anger motivated them to go and organize sit-down strikes and organize workers to demand better treatment on the job. And that's good. And communists, they felt that the world was out to get them. They felt they didn't fit in. And so that inspired them to go out and fight fascism and protect people that were being hurt by the fascists. And that's good. There's a great movie you should go see called Julia. Have you ever seen this movie? It's a really good movie. It's called Julia from 1978. And it's a film. It's a fictional story. It's a fictionalized account, of the memories of a brilliant writer named Lillian Hellman. All right. It's a movie. It stars Jane Fonda, and it's about a very rich girl who is a communist, right? A very rich girl from a rich family who's got issues. She's mentally ill. She's a lesbian and is kind of in denial about being a lesbian or whatever, but she's a rich girl from a rich family, and she becomes a communist. And so she gets involved in underground resistance in Nazi Germany and, smuggling weapons to people in Nazi Germany that are fighting fascism. And out of her mental illness, out of her trauma, out of her damage, out of her sexual confusion, she's able to do great heroic acts. But this point that Reuben Osborne is making, which is that communism as a movement appeals to people's deviant and unhealthy emotions and often taps into those emotions to get people to do good things. And fascism is the inverse. Fascism generally appeals to people's very healthy emotions, their patriotism, their love of community, their love of family, but then uses that to get them to do very evil things. This is a little bit of a recipe for disaster because at the end of the day, people are more attracted to healthy emotions than negative ones, right? This is basic instinct. If you're walking down the street and you see a homeless person talking to themselves, they clearly have some kind of mental illness, and out of self-protection, you want to get away from them, right? To protect yourself, right? If you're on the subway train and somebody starts screaming and yelling and, you want to get away from them. And generally people run from mental illness, right? There are some people who maybe they see a mentally ill person, they want to help them, they take compassion on them. But generally, if somebody looks crazy, you want to get away from them. Meanwhile, if somebody looks like they've got their shit together, they're physically fit, they're confident, they look like they have money and resources, they understand, they speak clearly and coherently, people are attracted to that. People think, oh, I want to be like that person. They're physically fit, they're confident, they know what they're doing. And if it gets down to a fight between a movement that appeals to people on the basis of deviant emotions and a movement that appeals to people on the basis of healthy emotions, the movement that appeals to people on the basis of healthy emotions is going to win. And the movement that appeals to people on the basis of deviant emotions is going to lose. And so in the late 1930s, a brilliant man named Joseph Stalin was very dramatically trying to change communism. Stalin had a big fight with Trotsky. Trotsky believed in the theory of permanent revolution. Trotsky was an ultra deviant. He was somebody who hated his homeland. He hated Russia. In fact, he hated Russia so much, he fled the country. And he said that Russia couldn't have socialism. It was too poor. And he hated the peasantry of Russia, which were the majority. He said Russia was a backward country. And he was in love with New York City. He was in love with Berlin and London. He said New York City is the foundry where the fate of mankind would be forged. And Trotsky had his theory, his fantasy was permanent revolution, killing and death forever, until every last king and capitalist is beheaded, until we've marched communism all over the planet. Permanent revolution. And he wanted to militarize the Soviet Union. After the Russian Civil War, he wanted to make the entire Soviet Union a military state to support spreading communism all over the world. Stalin, on the other hand, he said, no, that's not going to work. We need to have socialism in one country. And we need to mobilize people to build up the country with 5-year economic plans. And Trotsky and Stalin had a falling out, and Trotsky fled first to Turkey and then to France and then to Mexico. And Stalin, as the leader of the Soviet Union, turned the Soviet Union into an industrial powerhouse, into a country that was strong enough to defeat the Nazis. But it gets even more interesting, because what did Stalin do during the Second World War? He brought back Christianity. Stalin brought back the Russian Orthodox Church. The Russian Orthodox Church, the Bolsheviks had considered it to be part of the Tsarist regime. The Tsar was like the Pope of the Russian Orthodox Church. And the communists were atheists, dialectical materialist atheists. But Stalin brought back the Russian Orthodox Church. And in fact, Stalin even made a movie called Ivan the Terrible. It was directed by Sergei Eisenstein. And it's a movie, and it's not about communism, and it's not about Bolsheviks. It's actually a movie about a czar in Russian history, about a famous czar who unified the Russian Empire and brought the peoples of the Russian Empire together, and how they were better because they were together. And if you watch this movie that was produced during the Second World War, it's interesting. I mean, the Soviet government was officially an atheist government, and the filmmaker, Sergei Eisenstein, was an atheist of Jewish descent. But I'm going to show you a couple scenes from the movie Ivan the Terrible. Right? This is from the movie Ivan the Terrible, a propaganda film, a movie that was created during World War II by the Soviet government to, promote the fight against the Nazis. And it's a really Christian movie. I'm going to show you. These are the liturgical extracts from Ivan the Terrible, the World War II movie.
Спаси меня, Боже, непогоды дошли до души моей. Я погряз в глубокой тени, не на чем спать. Пошел в ледяную воду, течение их упрекает меня. Я изнемог от воды, засохла гортань моя. Остановились глаза ненавидящих меня без вины больше, нежели волос на голове моей. Прав ли я? Не Божья ли кара? Чужим стал я для братьев моих и посторонним для сынов матери моей. Прав ли я в тяжкой борьбе своей? Сердце мое, я изнемог, ждал сострадания, а нет его. Утешитель искал, а не нашел их. Брешь! Ради русского царства великого.
Now, that's a really Christian movie. That's a very religious and patriotic movie about the history of Russia and the Russian Empire. And Stalin created this movie. And I actually want to show you, this is something that, let me be very clear, this does not represent, this is not the Russian government's position. This is not the position of the Russian Orthodox Church. It's just something that is there, that exists, you know? And it is the Russian Orthodox Church officially does not condone this. The Russian government certainly doesn't agree with this, but it exists. And if you go to Russia, you will see this. This is a Russian Orthodox woman, and she's at a communist parade, and she has an Orthodox icon of Stalin. And all over the former Soviet Union, there are people who believe that Stalin was a Christian. Now, that doesn't make any sense. Stalin preached dialectical materialist atheism. He wrote books on it until he died. Stalin went to seminary school, you know, and he was a seminary school dropout. But after he quit seminary school, he became an atheist. But yet, during the Russian Orthodox, you know, during the Second World War, he brought back the Russian Orthodox Church. And after the war, he built churches all over the Soviet Union. In fact, there's never been another leader in Russia who's built as many churches as Stalin. Stalin built lots of churches, and he built more churches than any other Russian leader ever has. Now, Lenin destroyed and bombed a lot of churches, but Stalin built a lot of them. But he was officially an atheist, and there's no solid proof that Stalin was a Christian, but yet all over the former Soviet Union, you can see images like this. In Georgia, there was a church, a Russian Orthodox church, that erected a mural of Stalin because he was from Georgia. And all across Russia, the Russian people, who are very proud of their defeat of the Nazis in World War II, they consider Stalin to have been a Christian, even though that doesn't make any sense. Even though that's not something that the historical record says, there's many Russians who just say they know this. And in fact, there are Russians who claim that that during the Second World War, there were angels, right? There are veterans of the Battle of Stalingrad who claim that they saw angels in the sky striking down Nazi tanks. Now, you know, war is a crazy thing. The Battle of Stalingrad was a pretty awful battle, you know, and hallucinations, and I don't know what happened. But there apparently are a number of Orthodox Christian Russian men, World War II veterans, who swear that in the sky there were angels and that the Battle of Stalingrad was won by the power of Jesus Christ. You know, it's wild. It's absolutely wild. It's absolutely wild. But why does all of this matter? Why does all of this matter? What am I trying to get at? Why does the legend of Christian Stalin matter? Why does Superman matter? Why does Eugene O'Neill and F. Scott Fitzgerald, why does this matter? Why does any of this matter? I'll tell you one more story. This is a story I've told on here. It happened about a year ago. I was in Brooklyn. I was in Shore Parkway, which is it's an area in Brooklyn. And there were two Jehovah's Witnesses that were out on the street passing out the Watchtower, their magazine. And it was in a language I had never seen before. So I walked up to them and I said, "What language is that?" And the guy said it was Georgian. It's from the nation of Georgia, right? The Georgians, they don't use the Cyrillic alphabet, the Russian Cyrillic alphabet. They have like their own alphabet for the Georgian national language. That's why I didn't recognize it. It was a young guy in his 20s who was a Jehovah's Witness from Georgia. And I asked him about the legend of Christian Stalin because I'm fascinated by this, right? And I asked him, why do so many people think that Stalin was a Christian? And he says to me, it's because he did so many good things. He helped so many people. He did so many great things. I was quite surprised by that answer. And he said, Stalin was not a Christian, but he was such a great person who did so many good things for so many people. Of course, people would believe he was a Christian. Well, that guy was new to the United States. He didn't know that in America, if you start talking about Stalin being a great guy who did so many good things, you're not going to be popular. He didn't learn to talk how most people living in America from the former USSR talk about, oh, it was horrible. I lived under the evils of communism, right? But this guy was fresh off the boat, and he gave me an honest answer. He did not believe that Stalin was a Christian, but he said, of course, people would think he is because he was such a good guy. He was such a good guy who did so many good things and lifted the country out of poverty, defeated the Nazi invaders, right? Industrialized the country. Here, I'll put on this clip. I can't show this clip enough times, right? Rarely does American television ever tell you the other side of the story. It is so rare, but I guess after the fall of the Soviet Union, PBS, they were doing kind of a post-mortem on the USSR. Why did so many people believe in communism? Why did so many people like Stalin? And they dared have this clip on PBS. And I cannot show this video enough, right? This is the other side of the story.
To produce engineers and technicians for the new society, training was expanded. And the communists said women should have equality with men, with equal pay. Ella Shishtir was one of a new generation of women.
Когда Ленин сказал, стране нужна электрификация, а коммунизм это советская...
When Lenin said that communism is Soviet power plus electrification, I decided that I should become an electrical engineer, that was my holy duty. And I didn't want to just draw up plans. I wanted to build an electric power station. That was my mission, and I achieved it. The revolution gave me the right to feel equal to any man. It gave me the right to work, to study what I wanted to study.
Fyodorova was held up as an example to others.
We live so well. Our hearts are so joyful. In no other country are there such happy young people as us. We're the happiest young people. And on behalf of all young people, I want to thank our party and our dear comrade Stalin for this joy that we have. Stalin set a task. Build this or build that. And thanks to the fact that people trusted him and this enthusiasm of young people, it was possible. Remember, this was a country where people were illiterate, lived in virtual darkness, wore birch bark shoes. Even now, I think it's like something out of a fairy tale. How was it possible, at one of the most difficult times, to raise these great construction sites? It was only possible through the unity of the people and the love of the people for their idol. Because for us, Stalin was an idol.
Teams of young activists were sent to the country.
We went from house to house in search of illiterate people. We made a note of their names. We then found suitable rooms to hold classes in.
Learning to write would open new doors for those trapped at the bottom of society. One woman who couldn't attend classes because of her child at home was helped by Anastasia Denisova.
Я сказала, что вот тебе учебник, вот будешь заниматься.
I said, here's a textbook for you. I'll come to you so you can learn to read at home. I remember vividly that when the baby cried, she carried on writing with one hand while she rocked him with the other. She was so keen to study. I'll always remember her striving for knowledge and enlightenment. It was immense.
For Valentina Mikova and Mikhail Arkhipov, these were the most fulfilling days of their lives.
На строительстве домен был один экскаватор. И то плохой.
There was one excavator at the blast furnace building site, and it wasn't always reliable. So we dug all the foundations by hand.
Понимаете,
The trench would be teeming with people. One takes the earth, throws it to the level above. The second person throws it to the third to the fourth, up to 5 or 6 levels. That was how we got the earth out of the trench. Then it was taken away in wheelbarrows.
That's the other side of the story. You'll never hear that in American media. And the whole reason that I'm doing this, I'll just be real with all of you for a moment. If you've been watching this channel for years, like many of you have, you've heard all of this before, but it bears repeating, as the cliche goes. It bears repeating. Why? How did I get into this? How in the world did I get into this? Well, I got into this because I'm a kid. I'm an adult now. I'm 37, but I was a kid in Ohio, in a really small town in Ohio. And, you know, when I was in 4th grade, my mother, who worked at a library in Stark County, Ohio, she was a member of a labor union, the Service Employees International Union, and she went on strike with the other librarians. And I walked the picket line with the other librarians. And I learned what a labor union was. And I got interested in labor unions and protests and things like that. And then my parents, you know, they're boomers and they love their folk music. And they took me to Woody Guthrie, or not Woody Guthrie, he was dead by the time I was a kid, but they took me to see Arlo Guthrie, his son. They took me to see Pete Seeger. They took me to folk music concerts. And the folk music is very communist. And I found out, I already learned what a labor union was. And as a kid, I sat in many concert halls as my parents were listening to their favorite music of Pete Seeger and Woody Guthrie and all of that. And I heard many songs about, you know, about the working man and the struggle of the working class and things like that. And then I went to Quito, Ecuador in 1999. My dad led nature tours in the Galapagos Islands as kind of a side job. And I went with my dad to Quito, Ecuador in 1999, when the country was in the middle of a famine created by U.S. imperialism, right? The IMF, the international bankers, had forced Ecuador to give up its currency, the dollar, had forced it to sell off its state-run oil company to the highest bidder and give up their home, their domestic currency and adopt the dollar as their currency. And Ecuador was in a world of hurt. And I went to Ecuador as a 12-year-old, and I'm walking through Ecuador seeing all kinds of starving, desperately poor people. And I was like, wow, I had never seen that level of poverty in my life. I mean, it was just an extreme level of poverty. And I was in Ecuador in the middle of the famine. And, then when I got back to the United States and when I was a kid, the USA invaded Iraq. 9/11 happened. The USA invaded Iraq, and I was very against the USA invading Iraq. My family, we had hosted a student from Pakistan. They had a program at one of the local colleges that you could be the host family of a student, of an international student. So my family had hosted a student from Pakistan. And so, after 9/11 at my school, they were saying things like all Muslims are terrorists. And the reason 9/11 happened is because they don't have the Bible. And I had known a Muslim. I had known a Muslim, and I knew that was wrong. And I disagreed with it. And people at my school were all like, oh my God, a Muslim? You might be a terrorist. It was just, and I didn't agree with the atmosphere of Muslims are all evil and invading Iraq. And that there were no weapons of mass destruction. And so I was very opposed to the Iraq war. I was interested in labor unions. I'd heard a lot of folk music. And so I started investigating communism. And everyone had always told me communism failed everywhere it's ever been tried. Right. And I accepted that as truth, that everywhere that's ever tried to have a communist economy, all it ever led to was everyone starving and being miserable and hungry and a brutal dictatorship or whatever. And I assumed that that was true because that's what everybody said. Everybody knew that. That was just a fact. So I remember that I was interested in communism, but I assumed that you couldn't be like any of the communist governments. So I went to the library and I got a book by Trotsky, because Trotsky was somebody that Stalin had killed. Trotsky was somebody who wasn't part of the Soviet Union. So I figured maybe Trotsky, maybe his idea of communism was a kind that could work and wouldn't be bad like the other kind. And I got my hands on a book by Trotsky called The Revolution Betrayed. And I opened chapter 1 of The Revolution Betrayed. And chapter 1 of The Revolution Betrayed is called What Has Been Achieved. And it's all statistics. Statistics about how much steel the Soviet Union was producing, how much wheat they were growing, how many tractors they were producing, how the Soviet Union's rate of electrification, all the power plants they were building. And Trotsky, this was Stalin's enemy. This was somebody Stalin killed. And the name of the book is The Revolution Betrayed. It's a book against the Soviet government. But yet the first chapter of the book was just statistic after statistic after statistic of what they had done. All the stuff they had built, all the power plants, all the steel mills, the oil industry. And I'm reading page after page about all the dramatic achievements of the Soviet Union. Page after page. And I thought, this can't be true. This can't possibly be true. This must be a lie, because everybody knows that communism just never worked anywhere. So I went back to the public library, and I got the encyclopedia. I got the section about the Soviet Union, went to the section about the economy, and it said right there, the Soviet Union had very big achievements, industrializing the country, building a modern country, wiping out illiteracy. The Soviet Union has more hospital beds per capita than any other country in the world. I'm looking at this, and I thought, what the hell? I've been lied to. And I discovered that everywhere I went, it was a lie through emphasis. They would emphasize the famine, the Holodomor in Ukraine, and they would ignore an entire country becoming an industrial superpower. They would emphasize problems in the USSR, and they would ignore dramatic achievements. And that Cuba had the highest life expectancy in Latin America, and that Gaddafi's Libya had the highest life expectancy in Africa with socialism, and that China had become the second largest economy under the leadership of the Communist Party. And that everything I'd been told about communism, it just doesn't work. Everyone just starves and is miserable the whole time. That was a big, fat lie. North Korea was a country when I was becoming political in the 90s, when I was a kid. North Korea was having a food crisis. But prior to the fall of the Soviet Union, North Korea had an even stronger economy than South Korea. We were told what we were all told, what everybody knew about communism was a lie. And from that moment on, I was interested in communism. And I wanted to be a communist, and I didn't want to be a Trotskyite. I didn't want to be an anarcho-communist. No, I wanted to be a Stalinist. I wanted to be a hardline communist because I'd been lied to. And I got interested in hardline communist groups, anti-revisionists, Maoists, hardline Marxist-Leninists. And it was through my interest in hardline communist groups that I first heard about the lady who wrote this book, Louise Strong. Right? This is a book called I Change Worlds, The Remaking of an American by Louise Strong. And I am really thankful that I found Louise Strong. Right? I'll put a picture of her on the screen. Louise Strong is from the Midwest. She actually went to Oberlin College, which is a college started by one of my ancestors in Ohio. And Louise Strong, the American journalist, the American writer, she was born in Nebraska, and she went to college in Ohio, and she was such a Christian. Her college thesis was actually on the power of prayer. She did a study about the effectiveness of prayer. That was her college thesis, right? She was a very religious woman. And because she was religious, she heard about child labor, which was really common in like 1900, right? And she was really opposed to child labor. And she became very devoted to opposing the fact there were children working in factories. She had a photo display about the evils of child labor that was sponsored by churches. And this wealthy woman whose father was a Christian pastor who went to Oberlin College, she went around America rallying against child labor because she thought it was wrong. And as she went around the country rallying against child labor, she met socialists and she learned about socialism. And she eventually moved to Seattle, Washington. And because she was a known advocate for children, and because at that point, Seattle, which was kind of a liberal place back then, it allowed women to vote and run for office, she was elected to the school board of the city of Seattle. She was on the school board as an advocate for children, as a humanitarian. And she was a school board member. And then World War I happened. And World War I began, and she opposed World War I. And when they started having military training for kids in the school, she opposed military training for children in school. So she was kicked out of the school board of Seattle for her anti-war stance. And after World War I, in 1919, the workers of Seattle went on strike. They had a general strike, and she was part of the general strike of Seattle, where the IWW, the Industrial Workers of the World, went on strike in the city of Seattle. And she was part of it, part of this big strike that happened. And after the Great General Strike of 1919, she decided she needed to go to the Soviet Union. So she was sponsored by the American Friends Service Committee, the Quakers, to go to Russia at a time when Russia was barricaded And in the early 1920s, she went to Russia and she visited a commune for orphan children named after John Reed, the children's commune, the John Reed's orphanage, the John Reed orphanage in the former Soviet Union. She wrote a book called The First Time in History about what the Soviet Union was really like. And Anna Louise Strong, she wrote, and if you read this book, it's very American, right? And she says that her communism, her advocacy for children, and her support for the Soviet Union was rooted in her Christian faith and her desire to be right in her soul. She said she always knew that she had to be right in her soul. She couldn't go against her beliefs. She knew she had to be right in her soul. And on top of that, she was an American. She was a pioneer. And she said that the Soviet people were the pioneers of her time, that they were building their country up from nothing. They were industrializing. They were using a new economic system that had never been practiced before called socialism. And that she said that the Soviet Union is the new America. And communism is the 20th century Americanism. Soviet Union is the new America. Stalin is the new George Washington. Stalin is the new Abraham Lincoln. And the American spirit that led her to advocate for children's rights, the American spirit that led her to be involved in the labor movement, the American spirit that led her to oppose World War I, and the American spirit that had led her to go all the way to Russia, that was alive in the Soviet Union. And if you read Anna Louise Strong's writing, it's very optimistic. It's not hate. It's not resentment. It's not jealousy. It's hope, and it's patriotism. And it's love for the Soviet Union and love for Mao Zedong and China. She eventually became the first American journalist, or the second American journalist to interview Mao Zedong. She became a big supporter and admirer of Mao Zedong. And Anna Louise Strong, her love for the Soviet Union and her love for communism is not alienation, and it's not bigotry, and it's not resentment. It's actually very patriotic. It's very Christian. It's very optimistic, right? Go read I Change Worlds. Go read her book, The Stalin Era. After Stalin died, Khrushchev gave his secret speech condemning Stalin. And she was so offended by that speech, she self-published. She couldn't even find a publisher to print her book. She self-published a book called The Stalin Era and defended Stalin and talked about what a brilliant leader Stalin was. And she talked about some of Stalin's faults, and she talked about the Great Terror, but she just wouldn't accept the narrative of Stalin that came out in the Khrushchev years. Anna Louise Strong, just an amazing woman on many, many levels. And I'm so thankful that I found her writings, because she was a communist in a way that wasn't about hate and wasn't about jealousy, wasn't about resentment, wasn't about fear and anger. She was a communist in the same way that Superman, you could say, was a communist. She was a communist in the same way. Hold on. She was a communist in the same way that, that, what's this image? Hold on. She was a communist. Anna Louise Strong, the great American writer, she was this kind of communist. And in the 1930s, Stalin realized that we need to be that kind of communist. We need to be that kind of communist. And that's why he brought back the Russian Orthodox Church. And that's why he made Ivan the Terrible, the film glorifying the motherland. And that's why the Communist Party USA had conventions like this. And that's why Superman, the Superman comic books were in line with the communist message. And after World War II, not only did the Soviet Union realize that this was the kind of communism they wanted to be, but the CIA and the imperialists realized that the other kind of communism, Trotskyism, was very useful to them. And George Soros and USAID and the new left and postmodernism and wokeism, that's the Trotskyism, the permanent revolution, the kind of communism that Stalin rejected, that the Soviet people rejected, that China repudiated. They repudiated the Cultural Revolution. They said it was a huge mistake. Deng Xiaoping said poverty is not socialism, but to get rich is glorious. And while the communist governments of the world are this kind of communism, and that's the kind of communism that the governments of the world are. It's the U.S. government. It's the American government and the CIA and the international bankers. They're the ones that have hijacked and they're utilizing the other kind of communism. They're the ones that have adopted they're the ones that have adopted this kind of communism. The kind of communism that appeals to the part of every kid that loves Lex Luthor but hates Superman. The kind of communism that salutes Charles Manson and celebrates the murders of Charles Manson. The kind of communism that talks about destruction, that appeals to people's resentment and desire for vengeance, desire to punish others. The kind of communism that celebrates chaos and resents order. That kind of communism has become almost completely the property of the international bankers. In order to save their system, the imperialists need degrowth. The only way the capitalist system can last is with mass destruction. There was a great economic crisis in the early 1900s, and then they had World War I, and they destroyed Europe, and then you had the Roaring '20s. That only lasted so long, and then they had a crisis of overproduction again. So then you had World War II, which was even bigger and destroyed so much of the world, and then you could have the post-World War II economic boom. Capitalism has this fundamental problem that human creative power cannot fit within the narrow restraints of the profit-centered economic system. Human brilliance and creativity has made production so efficient that the profit motive and the profit market, the chaos of the market cannot handle it. We can make self-driving cars now. We can make computers that can play chess better than human beings. Human technological advancement has gotten so good that a system where human beings have to sell their labor power in order to survive and profit dictates production, the anarchy of production, that system is outmoded. And that is the economics that Marx realized. And Marx wasn't even the first one to realize it. Edward Bellamy, he wrote The Parable of the Water Tank. And he said the exact same thing. Never before have we had a system where people are homeless because there are too many houses. Never before have we had a system where people are hungry because there's too much food. Never before have we had a system where the more stuff that is created, the more unemployment and hunger there is. That's not natural. And what is urgently needed is not chaos and degrowth. What is urgently needed is not people burning shit down and tearing shit down, right? This isn't what we urgently need. This is not going to solve the problem. right? I mean, we urgently need to address this crisis, this problem of the irrationality of the market, but the solution is not chaos and destruction, right? We urgently need to resolve this problem. And what we need is this. This is the answer to the problem. A government of action that will fight for working families, love of country, love of community, friendship between the peoples of the USA and the USSR. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. Long live the great unity of the people of the world. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need to join the exciting new economy that is emerging around the world. All right? There's a whole new world rising in the East. And there's an economy based on the anti-colonial revolutions of the 20th century. We need to join with this new economy, and we need a powerful government that will break the power of the big monopolies, that will invest in communities, providing education, paving roads, empowering young people. We need an anti-monopoly coalition, a government that crushes the power of the big bankers and empowers and emboldens working people and small business owners and all who produce genuine wealth. A government that'll break the power of the big monopolies and invest in humanity and start building and connect us with the rising new world in the East. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We absolutely need a government of action that will fight for working families. And we need to build the movement to create such a government of action. That is what we urgently need to do. And that is what I'm on here talking to you all about night after night after night. And that is what the Center for Political Innovation stands for. And that is why our project is so important. It's the most important project going on in America by far. No one is doing anything close to what we're doing because no one understands it the way we do. This is a unique understanding. We are city builders, optimistic, constructive, patriotic, anti-globalist, anti-imperialist innovationists. And you need to get involved in our movement because our movement is the center of the struggle against imperialism in America. And we are the only hope this country has got. The only hope America has is joining the new world. And we are the only movement that really understands how we can get that. And that is why you should join the Center for Political Innovation. And that is why you should come to our convention coming up July 12th. You can register down below. And that is why, no, we're not going to liquidate and join some other group. And that's no, we're not going to just fight with people on the internet. We're going to build our organization. I want to recruit you to a way of life. I want you to live with comrades struggling against imperialism. I want you to be involved in the movement. I am here to recruit you, not here to entertain you, to dance for you, to be your little monkey here on the internet performing and dancing for you. And no, I'm here to recruit you. I want you to be a revolutionary. I want you to build demonstrations and protests against imperialism. I want you to get involved in anti-imperialist organizing and activism. I want you to understand and feel the real joy and connection that I've felt by being part of the movement. I am here to recruit you to do that. That's what I'm doing. I want you to join a movement. I want you to be an innovationist. That's what I'm all about. And those are my opening remarks for tonight. Names and locations. I will call you all out as I see you. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us? Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? David Fox from Bendigo, Australia. Welcome, David. Good to have you with us. Anybody else? Ed in Louisville. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. The seasoned noob in China. Welcome. Alex in Brazil. Jeff in Delaware. Ryan in Kansas City. Fakio in Montreal. Alyssa in Virginia. Jenny in Cincinnati. Devin in West Virginia. Andy in Calgary. Greetings from Akron, Ohio, not too far from where I grew up. Zachary in Berkeley, California. Good morning from Denmark. Good morning from Denmark. Ian Chester in England. I salute you, good sir. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Patch in Arizona. Good to have you with us. Sarah in Oregon. So good to have you with us, Sarah. So good to have you with us. Anybody else? Eric in North Oregon. Good to have you. Good to have you. Anybody else? Dan now in Los Angeles. And he'll be in Chicago for our 7-day program. I'm looking forward to it. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? Well, listen, folks. I am proud to announce that the Center for Political Innovation, we have published yet another book. We have published lots of books, and this book was not written by me. This book was written by our own Penny. I hope you're watching now, Penny. Penny Arcos, our member in Minnesota who confronted Ilhan Omar, wrote this beautiful book, Jay in West Virginia. It's now available on Amazon. And it's $8.70. You can get yourself this book. We're going to have it in bulk at the convention for sale. David Fox ordered a copy yesterday. Oh, Gabby in Chicago. Shout out to Gabby. And this is our new book about the great African leader, Ibrahim Traore. You can order your copy today, or you can get one at the convention. We're going to have plenty at the convention. And Ibrahim Traore, he's the kind of communism that we believe in. I don't know. I don't even think he calls himself a communist. I know he's a Muslim. I know he studied Marxism. He was the leader of a Marxist group, Philip in north of Oregon. But, he's what we believe in. I don't know what you want to call it. I don't care what you call it. There's a lot of people who call themselves communism that are destructive. Ibrahim Traore is a great African leader and a great anti-imperialist. Inspired by Tomas Sankara. And Penny has written a book all about him. And we just had a rally in Chicago about him that I guess has really shaken up the internet. There's like 3 or 4 YouTube channels and Twitter pages that have done videos about our rally. And it's really made a splash. So I'm going to put that video on while I'm going to go get myself some water. But if you all have any questions you want me to answer for the second half of the show, the second half of the show is here now, and I'm here to answer your questions. So send Rumble rants with your questions, or you can cash at me with your questions. Questions can be sent via Rumble rant, or they can be sent to me on Cash App, Caleb Maupin 22. I'm here to answer your questions. So send in some questions. I'm going to put on the video of our rally. John McPeace is in Chicago, right? But anyway, yeah. So I'm going to put on the video of the Ibrahim Traore rally. It's the same message, right? Everything we do, we talk about many different issues. We have the same message: optimism, growth, anti-globalism, anti-imperialism. So here we go.
Africa is not a mistake to be fixed. Africa is not a failed continent. Africa is the womb of the world, the cradle of civilization, the keeper of tomorrow's hope.
We know that Ibrahim Traore is the future of the African continent, that he represents the African wing of the global anti-imperialist movement.
We see that he's providing health care for his people, he's putting people first, he cares about the infrastructure, He's creating systems so that people can thrive instead of being in poverty like we have here in this country.
So we are here telling people, hands off Africa. The colonialists need to mind their business.
Why is he a dictator in the mind of the American media? Well, because he cares about the people of Burkina Faso.
Let me tell you what Ibrahim Traore is doing. He has got agricultural projects. Burkina Faso is having a farming boom right now because of this great African leader. He has just made a law that any woman who has a child, her medical bills are completely eliminated. It's free to go to the doctor and have a child in Burkina Faso, in this African country, because mothers and maternal care is so important.
You speak of democracy, yet uphold a global structure where the powerful few veto the dreams of the many. We will no longer whisper in rooms where we deserve to speak with full voice.
He's not a criminal, he's just being there for his people.
And if we could just follow his example.
The forces that are trying to overthrow Ibrahim Traore are the same forces that keep Americans poor. We want a prosperous America, not one that is so focused on maintaining the global economic system that our own citizens live in poverty.
He admires Gaddafi, he admires Patrice Lumumba, he admires all the great African leaders of the past, and we're here to say that American working people should look to Ibrahim Traore as the kind of leadership we need. A builder, a constructor, someone who lifts people out of poverty, someone who stands with the new economy rising in the world of the BRICS with Russia and China.
Donald Trump, look at this man. Try to be like him. Don't be like Zelensky. Don't be a worm. Be a president like Ibrahim Traore.
New economy emerging in the world, and it's based on real wealth. What China's doing with the Belt and Road Initiative, what Russia is doing with the Eurasian Economic Union, what is happening in Latin America with Bolivarianism, with the axis of resistance. There's a whole new economy. And this fake Wall Street derivative rip-off usury economy of Wall Street in London, that economy is the past. And the only future America is going to have is joining this new economy.
Imagine what we could have in this world just by doing what he's doing for his people.
What we need to do is get the United States to link up with this new economy in the global south and in the east, right? They lifted 1 billion people out of poverty in 20 years, right? We could be part of that. Instead, Donald Trump, on orders from Benjamin Netanyahu and the international banks, is trying to destroy that new system. No, we don't need to destroy it. We need to join it.
We are a spiritual people. Before your cathedrals, our ancestors sang to the sky. Before your missionaries, we knew the language of the rivers and the laws of the sacred forest. Christianity came, Islam came, and we received them not as slaves but as seekers. But now we ask, will the church and the mosque stand with us, truly with us, when all people are displaced by greed, masked as globalization? Will your pulpits echo our cries or only repeat the songs of the powerful? Faith, too, must be decolonized. It must walk with the poor, not the privileged.
Well, we're having a really important event coming up on July 12th at the Midwest Convention Center in North Lake near the O'Hare Airport. We're going to have speakers talking about the Houthis and the Yemeni movement. We're going to have speakers talking about the Palestinians. We're going to have speakers talking about Africa and what's going on there. We're going to have speakers talking about the peaceful reunification of the Korean Peninsula. We're going to have music. We're going to have traditional dancers from the former Soviet Union. It's just going to be really amazing in so many ways.
Anti-imperialist speakers, cultural performers, dancers, music. It's going to be really special. 500 like-minded people.
If you can't make it, send us a donation to cover all the costs. It certainly costs a lot to rent out this big venue and get everyone there.
And to the youth of Africa, to the young boy selling oranges by the roadside, to the girl who walks 10 kilometers to attend school, to the child whose only toy is a stone but who dreams of stars. You are the reason we fight. Do not believe the lie that your continent is cursed. You are the blessing. Do not envy foreign passports. Be proud of your name, your land, your roots. The world may not applaud you now, but the future will speak your name in honor.
So we need to be paying attention to him, we need to be supporting him, and we need to be in unity around the principles that he's advocating for as a leader.
And he is standing up to AFRICOM, standing up to NATO, saying, U.S. out, we want to develop Africa for African people, not for the bankers on Wall Street who are not only keeping the people of Africa poor, but keeping people in this very city poor. Why are there so many homeless people in America? Why is our infrastructure falling apart?
It's time that we hired the China Railway Company to build high-speed trains throughout the Midwest, connect Chicago to Washington, D.C. and to Los Angeles with high-speed railway. That's what we're talking about. We're saying it's time that we start having an education system that makes our kids smarter. We have social media apps that train our young people to be more confident and more physically fit. We need a government that invests in people, not a derivative rip-off government that makes profit from prison and war and death and destruction. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. And in Burkina Faso, this impoverished African country, they have such a government right now. They've got a builder, a man who believes that human beings are the source of real wealth in the world. And he is investing in his people, and they are raising up the population, raising up the life expectancy, raising up the living standards, raising up education, raising up health care, raising up access to a decent life. That's the kind of government we need here, a government of action that fights for working families.
They're keeping you poor in this country as well. It's an absolute disgrace. We need leadership like Ibrahim Traore. We need programs that will allow people to raise children. We need people to have jobs and education in schools. We don't need to be starting war after war, bombing people in the Middle East, bombing people in Africa, funding terrorists in the Horn of Africa, and then banning people from coming here. It's absolutely ridiculous.
But it's going to be like nothing you've ever seen. That auditorium is going to be packed. It holds 500. We think we can fill it. It's going to be a great event. So I hope you join us July 12th.
Long live
Ibrahim Traore! Long live Ibrahim Traore! Long live Ibrahim Traore! Long live Ibrahim Traore! It was actually really hectic trying to get the sign together.
It's not taking orders from anybody.
As you can see, it's kind of jerry-rigged up. We kind of didn't have the right stuff. We had to go back and forth to Home Depot 3 or 4 times, but it took us 2 hours to set up the banner, but the reaction's been pretty nice, right?
They want you to believe there's too many people in the world. Bullshit. Bullshit. We need more people because human beings, human labor power is the source of all wealth. We need a government that invests in people, provides people with jobs, provides people with health care, provides people with education, and builds and constructs. Don't invest in bombs, don't invest in prisons, invest in people, human beings, and our creativity. We are the source, and we need a pro-people government. And that's what Ibrahim Traore is on the African continent. And that's why he's teaming up with China to build power plants. And that's why he's enabled thousands of Africans to become farmers and have their own orchards and have their own fields. Behind him, we have got whole fields of wealth. That's what he's about.
I do not come to declare war, I come to declare will. So we will not kneel to fear. We will not kneel to foreign banks. We will not kneel to outdated empires masquerading as friends. Africa is not asking for a seat at your table. We are building our own, a table where no child eats last, where no nation is silenced because it lacks nuclear arms, where justice is not filtered through the lens of race or history, but shared as breath is shared. This is our vision and this is our vow. Let the world hear it today and always. Africa will not kneel.
We need a government like Ibrahim Traore in America. That's what we need, a government of action that will fight for working families. So join us in Chicago, July 12th. Working families first, defeat the deep state for a new world of peace and innovation.
The most revolutionary thing to do, as Ibrahim Traore is showing us, is to build. Not destroy, but build. We need to build our way out of this global crisis. We can't bomb our way out of it, right? They're trying. But the more they try, the more trouble they get their system into. They need to join the new system that is already being built. And that's the message of our conference.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
Dare to struggle.
Dare to win.
All right, everybody. So yeah, that was our rally for Ibrahim Traore, and also promoting our convention coming up on July 12th, which is what I'm eating, sleeping, and breathing right now. You know, it's like, but hey, there you go. I guess we haven't gotten any questions that people have sent in yet. So I guess this will be the last call. I feel like I said, long live the great unity of the people of the world so many times on here. I can't not play the new China song. So I know I play this song on these live streams a lot. So I guess if you don't like it, you know, but I'm going to put this on. And please send a question. Give me something to talk about. If not, we'll probably end pretty quickly after that. So yeah, here we go.
Got to the border, we began to walk. over the bridge we were to cross. One was the bloody British rag of imperialism, casting its shadow over poverty, starvation, vicious exploitation in Hong Kong. The other was the flaming red flag of revolution and socialism, telling us all, the people of the world, the time has come to come along. This ain't just any old border that we are standing on. It stands between two systems, one died, one young and strong. And then we crossed that bridge into China, saw a great banner up ahead. Its meaning set my heart a pounding, and this is what that banner is. Long live the great unity of the peoples of the world. Long live the great unity of the peoples of the world. Went to a steel mill, saw people working hard, but there were no bosses. The workers ran the job. They worked 10 hours, 6 days a week, on great machines built by their own hand. They labor not for some rich man's profits, but to meet the needs of people of the land. And they are building with such a spirit of revolution and socialism, for they are masters of their own future. The working class is in command. Talked with an older worker. He said many worries are gone. If one is sick or injured, they are provided for. We have no fear of rising prices, no unemployment will you find. There's always more to be done to build China, not just for us but to free mankind. Long live the People's Republic, long live working class rule. Long live the People's Republic, long live working class rule. We arrived in Shanghai, where before it was free, dope and prostitution and starving people filled the streets. And now these people stand up united, providing for the needs of all. Decent housing, health care, education, they decide now they are the law. And man, I felt so damn proud of China, of revolution and socialism. Just look at what our class has accomplished. Just look at what the struggle has won. We talked with men and women, now working side by side, about our many struggles for freedom so long denied. They said, comrades, China is with you. This is your country as well as ours. The struggles of the people united will be triumphant. We have the power. Long live the great unity, yeah, of the peoples of the world. Long live the great unity of the peoples of the world. You know, I missed my family, wish they were there with me. I knew they're back home struggling to change society. And I admit I hated to leave China. You know that freedom kinda grows on you. But now I feel such deep determination to do the job we all have to do. Remember people, our day is coming. Make revolution, build socialism, to do away with class exploitation, to end oppression once and for all. And I have learned a lesson that I will always heed. The fight to end oppression, the working class must lead. But we will build us up a great movement to sweep away the system we're in. And nothing gonna stop us from doing it. We will fight and we will win. Long live the People's Republic. Long live working class rule. Long live the People's Republic. Long live working class rule.
All righty. Yeah, so I guess people don't really have any more questions. That's okay. We've done well over 2 hours tonight. You know, the main thing is our convention's coming up, you know, and that's what I'm thinking about constantly is our convention coming up. It is really, my mind is on making sure that we have a very successful week of activities, you know, coming up, and, you know, that's what my mind is on. So, you know, I would really appreciate it if you would all attend the upcoming convention. The more people there, the better. And if you can't make it, send us a donation. You know, there's some people saying they couldn't make it for this reason or that reason. Well, send us a donation. You know, if you're not able to make it, you know, send us a gift, send us a donation, because the costs are adding up. You know, and hey, send us a donation to cover the cost of the convention. I'm very excited about it, working on a lot of different things to make July 12th a special day and to make July 13th a special day. And, you know, a lot of things are happening. So, all right, folks, I guess we'll call it a night. I'll be back probably tomorrow night. I'm going to try to stream as much as I can between now and when I head back to Chicago. So thank you, everybody. I guess I'll put on the closing music, and yeah, we'll catch you next time.
New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.